So, turns out I was on mute. Thanks, Katie. So, rolling back, the reason why we're doing this is to make lots of mistakes. That's one that I just made. So, in summary, this is a quick repeat of the session that we ran on Sunday that Twitch failed to save. So, we're going to go in and look at some English Premier League fixtures. We're going to use the Postman app. And the reason we're doing this is because it's an example of getting some data back from Postman that's absolutely massive and hard to read with the human eye. So what you can do is you can use the visualize and actually go, these are the bits of information that I care about. Let's just have a look at these few things. And secret submission, which we already failed against once tonight, is make sure that my streaming setup is actually working, because let's get these bugs out of the way before we actually start advertising what it is that we're doing here. So the two resources we're going to use tonight are, there's an app called Postman, which I'm assuming you've got some basic familiarity with, but I'll take you through the basics. And also the API we're using is a website called Football Data, which is free to sign up on. Let's take you through those two things now quickly. So Postman, you just go to postman.com. You can download the app from there. This is an app that started in the old days. It was just a simple way of making very simple sort of post requests and get requests to a website, see them coming back. Sort of a way of looking at the internals. Before things like Chrome DevTools were used commonly, this is sort of a very user-friendly way of just seeing what's going on. They built a whole load of things on top of that now that are now getting really mature, particularly around testing. It's actually really useful for automatically running tests against requests, doing a lot of the work for you. But the stuff we're going to look at today is relatively new. I think the visualizer, he says under his breath, was introduced last year, maybe. I certainly only remember seeing it a few months ago, but I'm a little bit behind the curve on this sort of thing. But we're going to use Postman. And then the website we're going to use is an API that's on football-data.org. This is a site that you can register for free. They have football data for a whole load of different leagues. So they have a free tier that gives you things like the Premier League. If you want access to more niche leagues, or from slightly rarer countries, you can sign up for a paid-for tier. This is actually a website that I do sign up for. I have got a signed up for membership on the site because I use some stuff on lower leagues for other projects that I do. But the other good thing they have is a massive API documentation section. And one of the really, really good things about the documentation is they've introduced this button that is being used all over the web these days that says Run in Postman. Now, what this means is if you've got Postman open, which I have, let me just collapse these collections down here. So here's my bare bones Postman. If I'm like, well, how do I use football data in Postman? If I hit this button, then it will say, do you want to run it in Postman for Mac? Yes, I do. Yes, I really, really do. And then boom, what it's done is it's brought in basically examples of every single resource they've got. So here you go, every single endpoint they've got with the URL for how that resource is used. So that gets you started in Postman really, really quickly. So the thing I said that we want to do is we're going to look at English Premier League fixtures. Now, as I say, I did this once on Sunday and I made a few mistakes as I went through it, as to be expected. Now, theoretically, having done this once before, I should be able to do it again without making mistakes, which will be even more hilarious when I do make the mistakes. So the first thing we need to do is we need to double check what the URL is going to be to get the fixtures. And the endpoint that we use is, I think, it's competition matches. So competition / some magic competition code / matches. So the first thing we need to do is work out, well, what is the code for the Premier League? Now, I do know it off the top of my head, but let's just go back to competition list. If we hit send on this, we'll get a whole load of data back. And if I just do a find in here for the phrase Premier League, then we have English Premier League, and there's an ID up there, which is 2021. That's the code in this API for the English Premier League. So if we take the URL for the fixtures, I'm going to copy it from here and put it into my new episode 0 take 2 collection here. If we do add request called get PL fixtures, it's a get request. We're going to put this URL in. We're going to change this competition code to 2021. Now, when we hit send, we should get the Premier League fixtures. And I made this mistake last time. This is an example of the fact that this API needs authentication. It says the resource you are looking for is restricted. So although it's a free website, you do have to register for an account to prove who you are, and so they can stop you from spamming with requests, for example. And having done this earlier, I know that what you need to do is you need to put a header in called x-auth-token. and then put in the token that you're given when you sign up for the site. Now, I've got a secret shortcut for mine, which is the phrase secret auth header. You can see what my key is there. It's no big deal. That is my free subscription one, so stealing it doesn't get you anything special. But if I put that in there, now I am authenticated. So when I hit send this time, I will really get fixtures back. Now, there you go. It came back with a size of 1/4 meg, 247,000 bytes of data. And there's a whole load of stuff covering the entire English Premier League season. There is, as I say at the top, there are 380 matches. Now, if you're trying to read through this by hand and work out what's going on, you could do it. For example, there's Manchester City against Aston Villa. And if you scroll down a bit, let's scroll down loads further. And there is Aston Villa against Sheffield United. And that's on the 20th of September. But it's a bit of a pain. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this new-ish feature in Postman called the visualizer. If we click across to this tab, because we haven't done anything yet, it says can't visualize the response. And because they're brilliant, they give you a link here that says learn how. And this takes you to a quick how-to guide. And the best thing about it is it has some samples that you can just copy and paste and start using. So these docs are here if you want to read them. We're not going to sit here and read the docs together. All I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the bits that you actually need to get the visualizer working. So bit number 1 is the template. Now we're going to change this in a minute because it's not suitable for our purpose, but just copy out the template. Now the place you put this in Postman is the tab called tests, which is a little bit odd. You've got a pre-request script, which is everything that runs before the request, and tests is everything that runs after it. Now the visualizer was introduced recently. Kind of want this to be called like post-response script or something that also includes tests, because it's a bit weird that you have to put this in tests, but here we are. And as well as the template, we need this little piece of code here which says, tells the Postman we're going to set the visualizer to use that template. I think I double clicked there by mistake. So what we need to do here, this template is a little snippet of HTML that it will use to render the response. And the important thing for this sort of endpoint is it's got this keyword here called each. Now this language, this double bracket language is called handlebars, which I used briefly on a project at Zoopla that never went anywhere, but it means I've seen it before already, so I recognize what's going on. Now in the first session, a lot of my time here was spent remembering what the keywords are that you use in handlebars and Googling them and so on and so forth. I'm going to skip forward from that bit because A, it's boring, and B, I'm tired. I'm just going to get to the end of the session. So let's go back and look at this data that we're trying to render. So what's the important information we care about in a match? I guess we want to know the date of the match. We'll pull in the status because a few matches are showing up as postponed. This is because of the way the last season ran quite late. It only finished a week or two ago. The clubs like Manchester City and Manchester United, who were still in Europe until quite recently, have been given like an extra week to rest. So their games have been postponed. So we'd like to know that. And I guess we also want the team names. Now, let's see if I can get this right the first time. First of all, let's set that. So it's going to render it in a table for now. We'll put match date as our first column. We'll put status, whether it's postponed or not. And then we'll just put fixture. And we'll put both teams in that column there. Now this says for each thing. Now response is it's set here. Set the response to the JSON that's come back. So what we need to do is work out what part of the response we need. And if you look in the JSON, all the matches are under a node called matches. So we need to say for everything in response.matches. So what this is going to do is it's going to go through these one by one very quickly, but it will say, okay, here's the first match. What data would you like me to put out, Neil? And the answer is the first thing we want is the date, which is under UTC date. The next thing is the status, which is the value underneath it, which is status. Oops, I accidentally typed my surname. Couldn't have done that again if I tried. And then we want the fixture. So this is team versus team. And if you look a bit further down, this is slightly more nested. So you've got home team and then name. So we're going to use dot notation here. So you go home team dot name versus away team dot name. Now, with a bit of luck, I do a thing before I hit a button where I put like a fake bet on how confident I am, like a bet out of £1. I'm like 95 pence confident. I would wager 95 pence that this is going to work. Let's have a look. If we hit send. The first clue that it might have worked is there's no errors. If a visualizer tab has gone wrong, it will display a little red dot there saying your code's all screwy. So let's go across and, well, hey, there we have it. A much easier to read list of data. So I have used this once in my current role to just pull out where we've got an endpoint that pulls back loads of data. I only cared about like the insurance price for the customer we're dealing with. And so rather than have to scroll manually through thousands of lines of JSON, I can just go, hey, here you go. So this is fairly new in Postman. And what I did at this point on Sunday was I started looking at what else we could do. And I said, hey, wouldn't it be neat if we could filter out the postponed ones because they're not actually taking place. We don't care about them. The more I looked into this, the more I realized it's not actually possible in Postman yet because Postman's implementation of the handlebars engine is quite sort of immature so far. They have a concept in handlebars of a thing called helpers, and you have to register those helpers. It's probably in my history if I go up and search for Postman handlebars helpers. There is an open support topic saying, can we have them please? Because it's not yet possible. There's a GitHub request there that I will be adding my name to because, yeah, the number of cool things you could do once they're implemented is quite large. So it means we couldn't do things like that. I will show you an example of a slightly more advanced handlebars feature in a second because we're going to use a second endpoint because that's basically objective achieved for this session. And on Sunday, I got here similarly quickly and I said, well, what else can we do? And I thought, well, let's do something a little bit more visual. There's an endpoint that actually get back the list of teams in the Premier League and also a load of data, including things like their logos. So wouldn't it be neat if we could just output a list of the logos of all the Premier League teams? So again, if we go remember what we did last time, first of all, we need to find the endpoint we want. And I think it's competition teams. There we go. So competition/ID/teams. Let's copy that URL into our Take Two collection. Get PL teams, we'll call this. We'll paste the URL in there and change the ID to 2021, which is the one that we want. And again, when we click, I nearly clicked save. Is to steal the code we used last time, because one of the best things about being a tester is you can just steal the code that worked last time. And this time we're going to change our template and we will give ourselves the logo, the team name, and let's write out their address as well. So this time the thing we're looping over isn't called response.matches, it's called response.teams. We see on line 22 there, we're looping around teams. And again, the way you do this is you're writing HTML and you use these snippets to stick in the bit you want. So I'm going to use quite old school HTML rather than nice CSS stuff. But if I do image equals, and it's called crest URL, you can see in the snippet below, that should put the image for that team in there. We then want the team name, which is a name, and the address is an address. I'm pretty confident. Oh, I know the other thing we did on Sunday, we found the address doesn't actually include the stadium name. So the Emirates Stadium is under venue. So let's put the actual stadium name in bold. And then we'll stick in a line break and then display the address. I'm 99 pence confident in this. It didn't error, huzzah. We have, yay, a load of logos that are a bit big. So again, we can just use a quick, let's just make them a bit smaller, width 200. Yay, they're a bit smaller. And there we have it, a list of all the teams in the Premier League with their logos. That's much easier to understand than that massive chunk of JSON that came back, if I do say so myself. Now, this is where I was looking for an example of where we could do something more advanced in handlebars. You remember I tried to exclude the postpone matches and I couldn't because the only thing you can use at the moment easily is Booleans. So you can use if. You know, I'm going to need to go to the handlebars docs because I can't remember. So let's go handlebars if. Hey, look at that. It's in my results from last time. So here's an example in the handlebars docs. If you do if, and then a thing that evaluates the true or false. Now, what I realized when I was looking through the team data is there are some values that can come back as null. And one of them is if expression now, LC and they just from the send visual less than example of the sort of ideas of doing include if I'm get in the stream. I do some coding. I've got some really good ideas on it to write Python because I don't know. It's a moving house, so